First contact at Training Academy. The universe had seen many wonders, but nothing quite prepared the Galactic Military Academy for humanity's arrival. Deep in the heart of Space Station Nexus Prime, where the galaxy's finest military minds gathered to train the next generation of defenders, something unprecedented was about to unfold. Commander Zixtal adjusted his crystalline form against the observation deck's viewing panel, his translucent body refracting the harsh lights of the training facility below. As a Zeltharian, he had spent 3 centuries perfecting the art of warfare through careful calculation and precise strategy. Every movement was planned, every decision weighed against 1,000 variables. It was the way of civilized species. "The human arrives today," announced Sub-Commander Velnok, her compound eyes scanning multiple data streams simultaneously. The Morphac officer's chitinous exoskeleton clicked softly as she processed information through her hive mind connection. Intelligence reports suggest their species achieved spaceflight only recently. Primitive by our standards. Zixtal's crystalline structure pulsed with mild interest. Earth had been classified as a Class 12 death world, a planet so hostile that most galactic species couldn't survive there for more than a few standard hours. The fact that any intelligent life had evolved there at all was considered a statistical anomaly. That they had developed space technology was remarkable, but their military capabilities remained questionable. "What do we know about their combat doctrine?" asked Lieutenant Morveth, the young Corvani's silver fur rippling with nervous energy. His species had evolved on peaceful garden worlds where conflict was resolved through telepathic meditation and mutual understanding. Velnok's mandibles clicked dismissively. Crude projectile weapons, chemical explosives, and something they call nuclear deterrence. Their warfare appears to be based primarily on causing maximum destruction with minimal tactical sophistication. Through the massive transparasteel windows they watched as the human transport docked with the Academy. The vessel looked absurdly primitive compared to the sleek, energy-based designs of other galactic civilizations. It was all harsh angles and brutal functionality, like something designed more for survival than elegance. The airlock hissed open, and outstepped humanity's first representative to the Galactic Military Academy. Cadet Sarah Chen looked remarkably ordinary by galactic standards, bipedal, carbon-based, with the distinctive lack of natural armor, claws, or energy projection capabilities that marked most sentient species. She stood barely 1.7 meters tall, her dark hair pulled back in a simple knot, wearing what appeared to be primitive fabric-based clothing beneath the standard Academy-issued environmental suit. But there was something in her movement that made Zixtal's crystal matrix resonate with an unfamiliar frequency. She didn't move with the careful precision of a Zeltharian or the calculated efficiency of a Morphac. Instead, her movements carried a fluid readiness, as if she were prepared for something to go wrong at any moment. "Welcome to Nexus Prime Academy, Cadet Chen," Zixtal said as the human was escorted to the briefing room. "I am Commander Zixtal, your primary instructor. We will begin with standard combat evaluations to assess your capabilities." Sarah smiled, and Zixtal noticed something peculiar. Unlike other species whose expressions of pleasure were typically accompanied by relaxed body language, the human smile came with a subtle shift in stance that suggested increased alertness, rather than decreased tension. "Looking forward to it, sir," she replied. "I've read about the Academy's training programs. Should be interesting." The first phase of evaluation took place in the Academy's standard combat simulation chamber. The facility could recreate any known battlefield environment, from the crystalline caverns of Zelt Prime to the gaseous storms of the Morphac homeworld. For new cadets, they typically began with Level 3 scenarios, challenging enough to test basic competencies without overwhelming unprepared minds. "We'll start you with a basic urban combat scenario," Velnok explained as she programmed the simulation. "The objective is simple: navigate through a hostile environment, neutralize threats, and secure the target zone. Most cadets require several attempts to complete this successfully." The chamber transformed around Sarah, creating a perfect replica of a war-torn city. Buildings rose from the floor, complete with debris, smoke, and the distant sound of weapons, fire. Holographic enemies began patrolling the streets, their weapons primed and their AI protocols set to provide moderate resistance. Sarah surveyed the environment for exactly 3.2 seconds before moving. What happened next would be discussed in academy circles for generations to come. Instead of taking cover and carefully planning her approach as academy doctrine dictated, Sarah simply walked forward. Not ran, not crept. Walked, as if she were taking a casual stroll through a park. When the first holographic enemy appeared around a corner, weapon raised, Sarah's response was instantaneous. She dropped to one knee, drew her training weapon, and fired 3 precise shots before the enemy's targeting system could fully lock onto her position. But it wasn't her accuracy that disturbed the observers. It was the sound she made as she did it. Sarah Chen was laughing. Not the nervous laughter of stress response that some species exhibited under pressure, nor the artificial laughter used by others as a form of psychological warfare. This was genuine, joyful amusement, as if she had just encountered something delightfully entertaining. "Contact front," she said into her comm unit, though Academy protocol didn't require verbal reports during basic scenarios. "Standard patrol, pattern maybe level 2 AI. This is going to be fun." Fun. Zixtal's crystalline structure flickered with confusion. The human considered a combat scenario designed to test military readiness to be recreational activity. Sarah continued through the simulation, and her performance became increasingly disturbing to observe. She didn't just complete objectives, she exceeded them with what could only be described as enthusiasm. When faced with multiple enemies, she didn't seek cover, she advanced toward them. When the simulation presented her with a choice between a safe route and a dangerous shortcut, she invariably chose danger. Most unsettling of all, her laughter continued throughout the entire exercise. She laughed when enemy fire came close enough to trigger her suit's proximity alarms. She laughed when she had to navigate through a collapsing building. She laughed hardest when the simulation's final challenge, a heavily armed patrol that typically took cadets multiple attempts to overcome, appeared in her path. "Oh, now this is more like it," she said, actually clapping her hands together before engaging 6 enemies simultaneously in close-quarters combat. The exercise that typically took Academy cadets 47 minutes to complete, Sarah finished in 12. She hadn't just passed. She had set a new Academy record while apparently having the time of her life. The observation deck fell silent as Sarah emerged from the simulation chamber, her face flushed with what humans called adrenaline high, still grinning broadly. "That was fantastic," she said to her instructors. The AI patterns were really sophisticated and the environmental hazards felt almost real. "When do we get to try the advanced scenarios?" Zixtal exchanged glances with his fellow instructors. In 3 centuries of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. The human had just treated their most challenging basics, scenario, as if it were a simple training exercise, and now she was asking for more difficulty. "Cadet Chen," he said carefully, "may I ask about your previous military experience?" Sarah tilted her head, considering the question. "Well, I did 4 years in the Earth Defense Force, with deployments in the Australian Outback Survival Program and the Antarctic Endurance Training. Before that, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, so I had plenty of experience with wilderness, survival, predator avoidance, and natural disaster response." The alien instructors looked at each other with growing concern. What Sarah described as normal childhood experiences would be considered extreme survival training by galactic standards. The Australian outback was known to contain some of Earth's most dangerous creatures, while Antarctica's conditions were hostile enough to kill most galactic species within minutes. "And the laughter?" Velnock asked, her compound eyes focusing intently on the human. "You seem to find the combat scenario amusing." Sarah's grin widened. "Oh, that? Yeah, sorry about that. It's just that the scenario reminded me of playing laser tag with my cousins when I was 12. Same basic concept, but laser tag was usually more challenging, because my cousins knew me well enough to predict my movements. The AI patterns here were pretty straightforward once you figured out their decision trees, laser tag. The human was comparing advanced military combat simulation to a childhood game. Lieutenant Morveth's fur stood on end. Cadet Chen, if you don't mind me asking, what would you consider a challenging scenario? Sarah thought about this for a moment. Well, back home we had monthly survival exercises in the Canadian Rockies during winter. You'd get dropped off with minimal equipment in temperatures that could kill you in minutes, with actual predators tracking you, unstable weather patterns and terrain that could give way without warning. The objective was to survive for 72 hours and make it to the extraction point. Now that was challenging because the environment itself was actively trying to kill you, not just the enemy forces. The room fell silent again. What the human described as training exercise would be classified as a war crime by galactic conventions. Perhaps, Zixtal said slowly, we should adjust your training program to something more appropriate for your skill level. Sarah's eyes lit up with anticipation. Really? Can we try the advanced scenarios? I promise I'll take them seriously. That was when the Academy's emergency alert system activated, filling the chamber with the harsh red glow of crisis lighting. An automated voice echoed through the facility. Priority alert, civilian transport under attack by pirates in Sector 7. All Academy units prepare for emergency deployment. This is not a drill. Zixtal felt his crystalline structure pulse with the familiar rhythms of command protocol activation. Real combat situations required careful planning, strategic assessment, and calculated risk management. The Academy would need to assemble a response team, brief them on the situation, and deploy with appropriate support. He turned to explain the situation to Cadet Chen, only to discover that she had already moved to the equipment lockers and was pulling on combat gear with practiced efficiency. Where's the tactical briefing room, she asked, checking her weapon systems with movements too quick and sure to be anything but muscle memory. And what's our estimated time to contact? Cadet Chen, Zixtal said, his voice carrying the harmonics of authority. This is a real combat situation. Academy protocol requires that first-year cadets remain in secure areas during emergency deployments. Sarah paused in her equipment check and looked directly at him. For the first time since her arrival, she wasn't smiling. Instead, her expression carried something that made Zixtal's ancient instincts whisper warnings about apex predators. Sir, she said quietly, there are people in danger. Where I come from, we don't wait for permission to help when lives are on the line, and that was when Commander Zixtal realized that the galaxy had severely miscalculated humanity's nature. They weren't primitive, they weren't underdeveloped, they were something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. They were survivors, who had learned to find joy in the face of death itself. The real test was about to begin. When theory meets reality, the pirate vessel was a modified Corvani freighter, its peaceful origins corrupted by the addition of military-grade weapons and reinforced armor plating. It hung in space like a metal parasite, attached to the civilian transport through docking clamps that could just as easily crush the smaller ship if the pirates decided their captives were more trouble than profit. In the Academy's command center, holographic displays showed the tactical situation in brutal detail. 43 civilian passengers and crew were trapped aboard the transport, while an unknown number of pirates controlled both vessels. Standard Galactic military protocol called for a careful siege approach, surround the target, negotiate for hostage release, and only engage if absolutely necessary to prevent civilian casualties. Commander Zixtal watched the tactical display with the calculating precision that had made him one of the galaxy's most respected military strategists. The pirates had chosen their position well, using the civilian ship as both shield and leverage. Any direct assault would likely result in significant innocent casualties. Estimated enemy force composition? He asked Sub-Commander Velnock. Scanning. Indicates 12 to 15 pirates, Velnock replied, her compound eyes processing multiple data streams. Mixed species, likely outcasts from various worlds. Moderate weapons technology, but they're using the civilian ship's life support systems as leverage. Lieutenant Morveth's silver fur rippled with distress. If we attempt a direct assault, the civilians will suffer. Perhaps we should open communications and attempt to negotiate. It was sound tactical thinking, based on centuries of established military doctrine. Minimize risk, preserve life, achieve objectives through the most efficient means possible. The Academy's senior cadets had been trained in precisely this type of scenario. That was when Sarah Chen stepped forward. "Request permission to join the Tactical assessment, sir," she said to Commander Zixtal. "Cadet Chen, as I explained, first-year cadets are not authorized for active combat operations," Zixtal replied, though something in the human's demeanor made his crystalline structure resonate with unease. Sarah nodded respectfully but didn't step back. "Understood, sir. May I ask what the pirates' demands are?" Velnok consulted her displays. "Standard piracy protocol. They want safe passage to the outer systems, plus payment for the civilians' release. However, intelligence indicates this particular group has a history of executing hostages even after receiving payment. So, negotiation isn't really an option," Sarah said. It wasn't a question. "The situation is more complex than—" Zixtal began. "Sir, with respect," Sarah interrupted, and every alien in the command center felt their species-specific equivalent of alarm. The human's voice had taken on a tone they had never heard before, not the cheerful enthusiasm from the training exercises, but something harder and infinitely more dangerous. "Those are innocent people. They're scared, they're probably hurt, and every minute we spend talking is another minute they're in hell." She gestured to the tactical display. "The pirates are using a modified Corvani freighter, right? That means they've kept the original docking system but added external weapons. The civilian transport is smaller, probably using standard commercial life support. If we cut power to the pirate ship's docking clamps while simultaneously breaching their hull in 3 specific locations." What followed was the most coldly efficient tactical analysis Zixtal had ever heard. Sarah wasn't just suggesting an assault plan. She was describing a precision operation that would neutralize the pirates, while protecting every civilian aboard. More disturbing still, she was calculating variables that the Academy's computers hadn't even considered. Psychological factors, equipment limitations, and what she called human element variations. "The plan has merit," admitted Velnok, though her mandibles clicked with uncertainty. "But the timing would have to be perfect, and it would require someone to manually breach the pirate vessel from the outside. The radiation exposure alone would be potentially fatal." Sarah smiled, and this time her expression made the alien officers take an involuntary step backward. "I volunteer." "Absolutely not," Zixtal said immediately. "Even if the plan were viable, which I'm not conceding, you're an untested cadet with no actual combat experience." "Sir," Sarah said, and now her voice carried something that made the command center's atmospheric processors work harder to maintain proper breathing mixtures for all species present. "I've had combat experience every day of my life since I was old enough to walk." She gestured to the viewport showing Earth's distant blue glow. "That planet down there? It's not just classified as a death world because of its environmental conditions. It's a death world because everything on it is actively trying to kill everything else. I grew up dodging avalanches, outrunning forest fires, and hiding from predators that could track a scent for kilometers. I learned to shoot before I learned to read, because in some parts of Earth, if you can't defend yourself, you don't survive to see your next birthday." The command center fell silent as Sarah continued. "When I was 8, I got lost in the wilderness for 3 days during a blizzard. The temperature dropped to 40 below zero. I had no food, no proper shelter, and no way to signal for help. You know what I did? I built a snow cave, set snares to catch small animals, and started a fire using friction from dry wood. Not because I was trained for survival, because if I didn't, I would die." Zixtal felt his crystalline matrix pulse with something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Genuine fear. Not fear of the human, but fear of what her words implied about her entire species. "When I was 12, Sarah continued, my family took a camping trip to the Amazon rainforest. On the second day, we were attacked by a jaguar, not a small one, a 200-pound predator with claws and teeth designed to kill things much larger than humans. My father was injured, my mother was trying to tend to him, and my little brother was frozen with fear. So I picked up a heavy branch and fought a jaguar. By myself. Because that's what you do when someone you love is in danger. She pointed to the tactical display showing the pirate ship. Those pirates? They're bullies with stolen weapons picking on defenseless civilians. What you call a dangerous combat situation, I call Tuesday. The only difference is that this time, I have proper equipment and backup. Sub-Commander Velnok's compound eyes, dilated with what her species considered mortal terror. You're describing scenarios that would kill most galactic species within minutes. How does your entire species survive such conditions? Sarah's grin returned, but now it carried an edge that made the aliens understand why Earth's predators had learned to fear humanity. We don't just survive. We adapt, we improvise, we overcome. And when something threatens the people we care about, we become the most dangerous thing in the area. She looked around the command center at the assembled alien officers. I appreciate that you want to follow protocol and minimize risks. But while you're calculating probabilities and assessing variables, real people are suffering. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to suit up, take a small craft to that pirate ship, and I'm going to get those civilians out. You can either help me by providing tactical support, or you can watch me do it alone. But either way, it's happening. Lieutenant Morveth's fur stood completely on end. The radiation exposure from manually breaching their hull would be fatal to most species. I'm not most species, Sarah replied simply. I'm human. We're what happens when evolution decides to see just how much punishment a species can take, and still keep fighting. Commander Zixtal found himself facing a decision that would reshape his understanding of warfare, diplomacy, and the nature of courage itself. Everything in his 3 centuries of military experience told him that Sarah's plan was reckless, dangerous, and likely to result in massive casualties. But everything in his deeper, more primitive instincts told him that this small, seemingly fragile human was the most dangerous warrior he had ever encountered. Very well, Cadet Chen, he said finally. We'll provide tactical support. But you're not going alone. I'm assigning Lieutenant Morveth to— Sir, respectfully no. Sarah interrupted. Your people are built for precision and calculation. This is going to be messy, improvised, and probably involve me doing things that will give everyone nightmares. I work better alone. And frankly, I don't want to be responsible for traumatizing a Corvani. 23 minutes later, Sarah Chen launched from the Academy's docking bay in a small reconnaissance craft. The alien officers watched through tactical displays as she approached the pirate vessel with a flight pattern that defied every principle of stealth and tactical maneuvering they had ever learned. She was flying straight at them. Cadet Chen, Zixtal's voice crackled through the communication system. You're approaching the target without any attempt at concealment. They'll detect you within— Already detected, Sarah's cheerful voice replied. They're hailing me now, probably wondering what kind of idiot flies directly at a pirate ship. Through the comm system, they could hear Sarah responding to the pirate's transmission. Pirate vessel, this is Cadet Sarah Chen, representing the Galactic Military Academy. I'm here to discuss the release of your hostages. The pirate captain's response was a mixture of laughter and disbelief. Little girl, you just flew a single-person craft to threaten a fully armed pirate vessel. Are you insane? Sarah's reply made every alien in the command center suddenly understand why their species had developed such elaborate peaceful conflict resolution protocols. Probably, she said, and her voice carried the same joyful enthusiasm she had shown during training exercises. But here's the thing about crazy. It's really hard to predict. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for the next 1,000 years. Instead of attempting to dock or negotiate, Sarah did something that no tactical manual had ever considered. She rammed her small craft directly into the pirate ship's main airlock. The collision should have killed her instantly. Instead, as the Academy's sensors detected, she had calculated the impact precisely to breach the pirate's hull while using her own ship's reinforced nose section as a boarding tube. She had literally turned a reconnaissance craft into a single-use boarding pod. I'm inside their ship. Her voice came through the comm system, slightly breathless but undeniably excited. Beginning hostage extraction now. For the next 18 minutes, The Academy's sensors tracked Sarah's movement through the pirate vessel. She didn't move like any warrior they had ever observed. Instead of following corridors and checking corners, she moved through the ship like water flowing downhill, taking the path of least resistance, but somehow always ending up exactly where she needed to be. The pirates, designed for intimidating defenseless civilians, found themselves facing something they had never encountered: a human who treated their threats as minor inconveniences. Sarah didn't negotiate with them or attempt to disable them through superior firepower. Instead, she simply moved through their ship as if she belonged there, neutralizing anyone who got in her way with an efficiency that was both terrifying and beautiful. "Hostiles neutralized," her voice reported. "Beginning civilian evacuation. Some of the passengers are injured, but everyone's alive." When the rescue shuttle docked with the Academy 31 minutes later, it carried 43 rescued civilians and one slightly singed human cadet. Sarah emerged from the shuttle with her uniform torn, her face streaked with soot, and her smile brighter than any star in the local system. "Mission accomplished," she reported to Commander Zixtal. "All civilians rescued. Pirates detained for proper authorities. Oh, and I think I figured out why your combat simulations felt so familiar." Zixtal's crystalline structure was pulsing, with frequencies he didn't recognize. "Explain." Sarah's grin took on that edge again. "They're designed by species that see combat as a problem to be solved through careful planning and superior technology. But where I come from, combat isn't a problem. It's just another day. We don't fight because we have to. We fight because we're good at it." She gestured toward the rescued civilians, who were being treated by Academy medical staff. "Those people are safe because I didn't think about tactics or strategy or risk assessment. I just did what needed to be done. That's not bravery or recklessness, that's just being human." In the weeks that followed, the Galactic Military Academy completely restructured their training programs. Sarah Chen became the youngest instructor. In Academy history, teaching courses with names like adaptive combat theory and survival-based tactical thinking. But more importantly, the galaxy began to understand something that would reshape interspecies relations for generations to come. Earth wasn't a primitive world that had somehow stumbled into space travel. It was a forge that had spent millions of years creating the ultimate survivors. And now those survivors were reaching for the stars, bringing with them a simple philosophy that both terrified and inspired every species they encountered. When someone needs help, you help them. When someone threatens innocence, you stop them. And when the universe tries to kill you, you smile and ask if that's the best it can do. The galaxy would never be the same.